The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, commonly known as the United Kingdom, UK, or Britain, is a country in northwestern Europe, off the coast of the continental mainland. It comprises England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. It includes the island of Great Britain, the northeastern part of the island of Ireland, and most of the smaller islands within the British Isles. Northern Ireland shares a land border with the Republic of Ireland. Otherwise, the United Kingdom is surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean, the North Sea, the English Channel, the Celtic Sea, and the Irish Sea. The total area of the United Kingdom is 244,376 square kilometers, with an estimated population of nearly 67.6 million people in 2022. In 1707, the Kingdom of England, which included Wales and the Kingdom of Scotland, united under the Treaty of Union to create the Kingdom of Great Britain. The Acts of Union 1800 incorporated the Kingdom of Ireland to create the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland in 1801. Most of Ireland seceded from the UK in 1922 as the Irish Free State, and the Royal and Parliamentary Titles Act 1927 created the present name, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The UK became the first industrialised country and was the world's foremost power for the majority of the 19th and early 20th centuries, particularly during the Pax Britannica between 1815 and 1914. At its height in the 1920s, the British Empire encompassed almost a quarter of the world's land mass and population, and was the largest empire in history. However, its involvement in the First World War and the Second World War damaged Britain's economic power, and a global wave of decolonization led to the independence of most British colonies. British influence can be observed in the legal and political systems of many of its former colonies, and British culture remains globally influential, particularly in language, literature, music, and sport. English is the world's most widely spoken language and the third most spoken native language. The United Kingdom is a constitutional monarchy and parliamentary democracy. The UK has three distinct jurisdictions: England and Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Since 1998, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have their own devolved governments and legislatures, while England is governed directly by the UK government. The capital and largest city of the United Kingdom is London. Other major cities include Birmingham, Liverpool, Nottingham, Sheffield, Bristol, Glasgow, and Leicester. Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland's national capital cities are Edinburgh, Cardiff and Belfast, respectively. The UK has the world's sixth largest economy by nominal gross domestic product, and the ninth largest by purchasing power parity. It is a recognized nuclear state and is ranked fourth globally in military expenditure. The UK has been a permanent member of the UN Security Council since its first session in 1946. It is a member of the Commonwealth of Nations, the Council of Europe, the G7, the OECD, NATO and the CPTPP. History. Prior to the Treaty of Union, settlement by Cro-Magnons of what was to become the United Kingdom occurred in waves beginning by about 30,000 years ago. The island has been continuously inhabited only since the last retreat of the ice around 11,500 years ago. By the end of the region's prehistoric period, the population is thought to have belonged largely to a culture termed Insular Celtic, comprising the Roman conquest, beginning in 43 AD, and the 400-year rule of southern Britain, was followed by an invasion by Germanic Anglo-Saxon settlers, reducing the Britannic area mainly to what was to become Wales, Cornwall and, until the latter stages of the Anglo-Saxon settlement, the Hen Ogledd, northern England and parts of southern Scotland. Most of the region settled by the Anglo-Saxons became unified as the Kingdom of England in the 10th century. Meanwhile, Gaelic speakers in northwest Britain with connections to the northeast of Ireland and traditionally supposed to have migrated from there in the 5th century united with the Picts to create the Kingdom of Scotland in the 9th century. In 1066, the Normans invaded England from northern France. After conquering England, they seized large parts of Wales, conquered much of Ireland and were invited to settle in Scotland, bringing to each country feudalism on the northern French model and Norman French culture. The Anglo-Norman ruling class greatly influenced, but eventually assimilated with, the local cultures. Subsequent medieval English kings completed the conquest of Wales and tried unsuccessfully to annex Scotland. Asserting its independence in the 1320 Declaration of Arbroath, Scotland maintained its independence thereafter, albeit in near constant conflict with England. The English monarchs, through inheritance of substantial territories in France and claims to the French crown, were also heavily involved in conflicts in France, most notably the 100 Years' War, while the kings of Scots were in an alliance with the French during this period. Early modern Britain saw religious conflict resulting from the Reformation and the introduction of Protestant state churches in each country. The English Reformation ushered in political, constitutional, social, and cultural change in the 16th century and established the Church of England. Moreover, it defined a national identity for England and slowly, but profoundly, changed people's religious beliefs. Wales was fully incorporated into the Kingdom of England, and Ireland was constituted as a kingdom in personal union with the English crown. In what was to become Northern Ireland, the lands of the independent Catholic Gaelic nobility were confiscated and given to Protestant settlers from England and Scotland. In 1603, the kingdoms of England, Scotland, and Ireland were united in a personal union when James VI, King of Scots, inherited the crowns of England and Ireland and moved his court from Edinburgh to London. Each country nevertheless remained a separate political entity and retained its separate political, legal, and religious institutions. In the mid-17th century, all three kingdoms were involved in a series of connected wars including the English Civil War which led to the temporary overthrow of the monarchy, with the execution of King Charles I, and the establishment of the short-lived Unitary Republic of the Commonwealth of England, Scotland, and Ireland. Although the monarchy was restored, the interregnum along with the Glorious Revolution of 1688 and the subsequent Bill of Rights 1689 in England and Claim of Right Act 1689 in Scotland ensured that, unlike much of the rest of Europe, royal absolutism would not prevail, and a professed Catholic could never accede to the throne. The British Constitution would develop on the basis of constitutional monarchy and the parliamentary system. With the founding of the Royal Society in 1660, science was greatly encouraged. During this period, particularly in England, the development of naval power and the interest in voyages of discovery led to the acquisition and settlement of overseas colonies, particularly in North America and the Caribbean. Though previous attempts at uniting the two kingdoms within Great Britain in 1606, 1667, and 1689 had proved unsuccessful, the attempt initiated in 1705 led to the Treaty of Union of 1706 being agreed and ratified by both parliaments. Kingdom of Great Britain. On May 1, 1707, the Kingdom of Great Britain was formed, the result of the Acts of Union 1707. In the 18th century, cabinet government developed under Robert Walpole, in practice the first Prime Minister. A series of Jacobite uprisings sought to remove the Protestant House of Hanover from the throne and restore the Catholic House of Stuart. The Jacobites were finally defeated at the Battle of Culloden in 1746, after which the Scottish Highlanders were forcibly assimilated into Scotland by revoking the feudal independence of clan chiefs. The British colonies in North America that broke away in the American War of Independence became the United States, recognized by Britain in 1783. British imperial ambition turned towards Asia, particularly to India. Britain played a leading part in the Atlantic slave trade, mainly between 1662 and 1807, when British or British colonial slave ships transported nearly 3.3 million slaves from Africa. The slaves were taken to work on plantations, principally in the Caribbean but also North America. Slavery coupled with the Caribbean sugar industry had a significant role in strengthening the British economy in the 18th century. However, with pressure from the abolitionism movement, Parliament banned the trade in 1807, banned slavery in the British Empire in 1833, and Britain took a role in the movement to abolish slavery worldwide through the blockade of Africa and pressing other nations to end their trade with a series of treaties. United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. In 1800 the Parliaments of Great Britain and Ireland each passed an Act of Union, uniting the two kingdoms and creating the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland on January 1, 1801. After the defeat of France at the end of the French Revolutionary Wars and Napoleonic Wars, the United Kingdom emerged as the principal naval and imperial power, with London the largest city in the world from about 1830. Unchallenged at sea, British dominance was later described as Pax Britannica, a period of relative peace among the great powers during which the British Empire became the global hegemon and adopted the role of global policeman. By the time of the Great Exhibition of 1851, Britain was described as the workshop of the world. From 1853 to 1856, Britain took part in the Crimean War, allied with the Ottoman Empire against Tsarist Russia, participating in the naval battles of the Baltic Sea known as the Åland War in the Gulf of Bothnia and the Gulf of Finland, among others. Following the Indian Rebellion in 1857, the British government led by Lord Palmerston assumed direct rule over India. Alongside the formal control it exerted over its own colonies, British dominance of much of world trade meant that it effectively controlled the economies of regions such as East Asia and Latin America. Throughout the Victorian era, political attitudes favored free trade and laissez-faire policies, as well as a gradual widening of the voting franchise, with the 1884 Reform Act championed by William Gladstone granting suffrage to a majority of males for the first time. The British population increased at a dramatic rate, accompanied by rapid urbanization, causing significant social and economic stresses. By the late 19th century, the Conservatives under Benjamin Disraeli and Lord Salisbury initiated a period of imperial expansion in Africa, maintained a policy of splendid isolation in Europe, and attempted to contain Russian influence in Afghanistan and Persia, in what came to be known as the Great Game. During this time, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand were granted self-governing dominion status. At the turn of the century, Britain's industrial dominance became challenged by the German Empire and the United States. The Edwardian era saw social reform and home rule for Ireland become important domestic issues, while the Labour Party emerged from an alliance of trade unions and small socialist groups in 1900, and suffragettes campaigned for women's right to vote. World Wars and partition of Ireland. Britain was one of the principal allies that defeated the Central Powers in the First World War. Alongside their French, Russian and after 1917, American counterparts, British armed forces were engaged across much of the British Empire and in several regions of Europe, particularly on the Western Front. The high fatalities of trench warfare caused the loss of much of a generation of men, with lasting social effects in the nation and a great disruption in the social order. Britain had suffered 2.5 million casualties and finished the war with a huge national debt. The consequences of the war persuaded the government to expand the right to vote in national and local elections with the Representation of the People Act 1918. After the war, Britain became a permanent member of the Executive Council of the League of Nations and received a mandate over a number of former German and Ottoman colonies. Under the leadership of David Lloyd George, the British Empire reached its greatest extent, covering a fifth of the world's land surface and a quarter of its population. By the mid-1920s, most of the British population could listen to BBC radio programs. Experimental television broadcasts began in 1929 and the first scheduled BBC television service commenced in 1936. The rise of Irish nationalism, and disputes within Ireland over the terms of Irish Home Rule, led eventually to the partition of the island in 1921. The Irish Free State became independent, initially with Dominion status in 1922, and unambiguously independent in 1931. Northern Ireland remained part of the United Kingdom. The 1928 Equal Franchise Act gave women electoral equality with men in national elections. Strikes in the mid-1920s culminated in the General Strike of 1926, which ended in a victory for the government led by Stanley Baldwin. Britain had still not recovered from the effects of the First World War when the Great Depression led to considerable unemployment and hardship in the old industrial areas, as well as political and social unrest with rising membership in communist and socialist parties. A coalition government was formed in 1931. Nonetheless, Britain was a very wealthy country, formidable in arms, ruthless in pursuit of its interests and sitting at the heart of a global production system. After Nazi Germany invaded Poland in 1939, Britain entered the Second World War. Winston Churchill became Prime Minister and head of a coalition government in 1940. Despite the defeat of its European allies in the first year, Britain and its empire continued the war against Germany. Churchill engaged industry, scientists, and engineers to support the government and the military in the prosecution of the war effort. In 1940, the Royal Air Force defeated the German Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain. Urban areas suffered heavy bombing during the Blitz. The Grand Alliance of Britain, the United States and the Soviet Union formed in 1941, leading the Allies against the Axis powers. There were eventual hard-fought victories in the Battle of the Atlantic, the North Africa Campaign and the Italian Campaign. British forces played important roles in the Normandy landings of 1944 and the liberation of Europe. The British Army led the Burma Campaign against Japan, and the British Pacific Fleet fought Japan at sea. British scientists contributed to the Manhattan Project, whose task was to build an atomic weapon. Once built, it was decided, with British consent, to use the weapon against Japan. The wartime net losses in British national wealth amounted to 18.6% of the pre-war wealth, at 1938 prices. Post-war 20th century. The UK was one of the big three powers along with the US and the Soviet Union who met to plan the post-war world. It was an original signatory to the Declaration by United Nations and became one of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. It worked closely with the United States to establish the IMF, World Bank, and NATO. The war left the UK severely weakened and financially dependent on the Marshall Plan, but it was spared the total war that devastated Eastern Europe. In the immediate post-war years, the Labour government under Clement Attlee initiated a radical program of reforms, which significantly impacted British society in the following decades. Major industries and public utilities were nationalised, a welfare state was established, and a comprehensive, publicly funded healthcare system, the National Health Service, was created. The rise of nationalism in the colonies coincided with Britain's much diminished economic position, so that a policy of decolonization was unavoidable. Independence was granted to India and Pakistan in 1947. Over the next 3 decades, most colonies of the British Empire gained their independence, and many became members of the Commonwealth of Nations. The UK was the third country to develop a nuclear weapons arsenal with its first atomic bomb test, Operation Hurricane, in 1952, but the post-war limits of Britain's international role were illustrated by the Suez Crisis of 1956. The international spread of the English language ensured the continuing international influence of its literature and culture. As a result of a shortage of workers in the 1950s, the government encouraged immigration from Commonwealth countries. In the following decades, the UK became a more multi-ethnic society. Despite rising living standards in the late 1950s and 1960s, the UK's economic performance was less successful than many of its main competitors such as France, West Germany, and Japan. In the decades-long process of European integration, the UK was a founding member of the Western European Union, established with the London and Paris conferences in 1954. In 1960 the UK was one of the 7 founding members of the European Free Trade Association, but in 1973 it left to join the European Communities. In a 1975 referendum 67% voted to stay in it. When the EC became the European Union in 1992, the UK was one of the 12 founding member states. From the late 1960s, Northern Ireland suffered communal and paramilitary violence conventionally known as the Troubles. It is usually considered to have ended with the 1998 Belfast Good Friday Agreement. Following a period of widespread economic slowdown and industrial strife in the 1970s, the Conservative government of the 1980s led by Margaret Thatcher initiated a radical policy of monetarism, deregulation, particularly of the financial sector and labor markets, the sale of state-owned companies, and the withdrawal of subsidies to others. In 1982, Argentina invaded the British territories of South Georgia and the Falkland Islands, leading to the 10-week Falklands War in which Argentine forces were defeated. The inhabitants of the islands are predominantly descendants of British settlers, and strongly favor British sovereignty, expressed in a 2013 referendum. From 1984, the UK economy was helped by the inflow of substantial North Sea oil revenues. Gibraltar has also been a subject of contention regarding its sovereignty. It was given to the UK from Spain in the 1713 Treaty of Utrecht forever. It has been a key military base for the UK, and a referendum in 2002 for shared sovereignty with Spain was lost by 98.97%. Around the end of the 20th century, there were major changes to the governance of the UK with the establishment of devolved administrations for Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The statutory incorporation followed acceptance of the European Convention on Human Rights. The UK remained a great power with global diplomatic and military influence and a leading role in the United Nations and NATO. 21st century. The UK broadly supported the United States' approach to the War on Terror in the early 21st century. British troops fought in the war in Afghanistan, but controversy surrounded Britain's military deployment in Iraq, which saw the largest protest in British history demonstrating in opposition to the government led by Tony Blair. The 2008 global financial crisis severely affected the UK economy. The Cameron-Clegg coalition government of 2010 introduced austerity measures intended to tackle the substantial public deficits. Studies have suggested that policy led to significant social disruption and suffering. A referendum on Scottish independence in 2014 resulted in the Scottish electorate voting by 55.3 to 44.7% to remain part of the United Kingdom. In 2016, 51.9% of voters in the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. The UK left the EU in 2020. On May 1, 2021 the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement came into force. The COVID-19 pandemic had a severe impact on the UK's economy, caused major disruptions to education and had far-reaching impacts on society and politics in 2020 and 2021. The United Kingdom was the first country in the world to use an approved COVID-19 vaccine, developing its own vaccine through a collaboration between Oxford University and AstraZeneca, which allowed the UK's vaccine rollout to be among the fastest in the world. On September 8, 2022, Elizabeth II, the longest living and longest reigning British monarch, died at the age of 96. Upon the Queen's death, her eldest child Charles, Prince of Wales, acceded to the British throne as Charles III. Politics. The UK is a constitutional monarchy and a parliamentary democracy operating under the Westminster system, otherwise known as a democratic parliamentary monarchy. It is a centralised, unitary state wherein the Parliament of the United Kingdom is sovereign. Parliament is made up of the elected House of Commons, the appointed House of Lords and the Crown as personified by the monarch. The main business of Parliament takes place in the two houses, but royal assent is required for a bill to become an Act of Parliament. As a result of parliamentary sovereignty, the British Constitution is uncodified, consisting mostly of disparate written sources, including parliamentary statutes, judge-made case law and international treaties, together with constitutional conventions. Nevertheless, the Supreme Court recognizes a number of principles underlying the British Constitution, such as parliamentary sovereignty, the rule of law, democracy, and upholding international law. King Charles III is the current monarch and head of state of the UK and of 14 other independent countries. These 15 countries are today referred to as Commonwealth realms. The monarch is formally vested with all executive authority as the personal embodiment of the Crown and is fundamental to the law and working of government in the UK. The disposition of such powers, however, including those belonging to the royal prerogative, is generally exercised only on the advice of ministers of the Crown responsible to Parliament and thence to the electorate. Nevertheless, in the performance of official duties, the monarch has the right to be consulted, the right to encourage, and the right to warn. In addition, the monarch has a number of reserve powers at his disposal, albeit rarely used, to uphold responsible government and prevent constitutional crises. For general elections, the UK is currently divided into 650 constituencies, each of which is represented by one member of Parliament elected by the first-past-the-post system. MPs hold office for up to 5 years and must then stand for re-election if they wish to continue to be an MP. The Conservative Party, colloquially known as the Tory Party or the Tories, and the Labour Party have been the dominant political parties in the UK since the 1920s, leading to the UK being described as a two-party system. However, since the 1920s other political parties have won seats in the House of Commons, although never more than the Conservatives or Labour. The Prime Minister is the head of government in the UK. Acting under the direction and supervision of a cabinet of senior ministers selected and led by the Prime Minister, the government serves as the principal instrument for public policy making, administers public services and, through the Privy Council, promulgates statutory instruments and tenders advice to the monarch. Nearly all Prime Ministers have served concurrently as First Lord of the Treasury, and all Prime Ministers have continuously served as First Lord of the Treasury since 1905, Minister for the Civil Service since 1968, and Minister for the Union since 2019. While appointed by the monarch, in modern times the Prime Minister is, by convention, an MP, the leader of the political party with the most seats in the House of Commons, and holds office by virtue of their ability to command the confidence of the House of Commons. The current Prime Minister, as of October 2022, is Rishi Sunak MP, leader of the Conservative Party. Although not part of the United Kingdom, the three Crown dependencies of Jersey, Guernsey, and Isle of Man and 14 British overseas territories across the globe are subject to the sovereignty of the British Crown. The Crown exercises its responsibilities in relation to the Crown dependencies mainly through the British Government's Home Office and for the British overseas territories principally through the Foreign Office. Foreign relations. The UK is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, a member of NATO, AUKUS, the Commonwealth of Nations, the G7 Finance Ministers, the G7 Forum, the G20, the OECD, the WTO, the Council of Europe and the OSCE. The UK has the British Council, which is a British organisation based in over 100 countries specialising in international cultural and educational opportunities. The UK is said to have a special relationship with the United States and a close partnership with France, the Entente Cordiale, and shares nuclear weapons technology with both countries. The Anglo-Portuguese alliance is considered to be the oldest binding military alliance in the world. The UK is also closely linked with the Republic of Ireland. The two countries share a common travel area and cooperate through the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference and the British-Irish Council. Britain's global presence and influence is further amplified through its trading relations, foreign investments, official development assistance and military engagements. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, all of which are former colonies of the British Empire which share King Charles as their head of state, are the most favourably viewed countries in the world by British people. Economy. The UK has a partially regulated market economy. Based on market exchange rates, the UK is the sixth largest economy in the world and the second largest in Europe by nominal GDP. The United Kingdom uses the pound sterling, the fourth most traded currency in the foreign exchange market and the world's fourth largest reserve currency after the United States dollar, euro, and yen. Sterling was the second best performing G10 currency against the dollar in 2023 with a gain of about 5%, with only the Swiss franc performing better. London is the world capital for foreign exchange trading, with a global market share of 38.1% in 2022 of the daily 7.5 trillion global turnover. Home Treasury, led by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, is responsible for developing and executing the government's public finance policy and economic policy. The Bank of England is the UK's central bank and is responsible for issuing notes and coins in the pound sterling. Banks in Scotland and Northern Ireland retain the right to issue their own notes, subject to retaining enough Bank of England notes in reserve to cover their issue. The estimated nominal GDP of the UK for 2024 is £2.765 trillion. This value is 23% higher than the 2019 figure of £2.255 trillion before leaving the EU. The service sector made up around 80% of the UK's GVA in 2021. As of 2022, the UK is the world's second largest exporter of services. London is one of the world's largest financial centres, ranking second in the world in the Global Financial Centres Index in 2022. London also has the largest city GDP in Europe. Edinburgh ranks 17th in the world, and 6th in Western Europe in the Global Financial Centres Index in 2020. Tourism is very important to the British economy. London was named as Europe's most popular destination for 2022. The creative industries accounted for 5.9% of the UK's GVA in 2019, having grown by 43.6% in real terms from 2010. Creative industries contributed more than £111 billion to the UK economy in 2018, Growth in the sector is more than 5 times larger than growth across the UK economy as a whole, as reported in 2018. Lloyd's of London is the world's largest insurance and reinsurance market and is located in London. WPP plc, the world's biggest advertising company, is also based in the UK. The UK is one of the leading retail markets in Europe and is home to Europe's largest e-commerce market. John Lewis is the UK's largest employee-owned business. The automotive industry employs around 800,000 people, with a turnover in 2022 of £67 billion, generating £27 billion of exports. In 2023, the UK produced around 905,100 passenger vehicles and 120,400 commercial vehicles. Output was up 17% on the previous year. Britain is known for iconic cars such as Mini and Jaguar, also other luxury cars such as Rolls-Royce, Bentley, and Range Rover. The UK is a major centre for engine manufacturing. In 2022 around 1.5 million engines were produced. It is also the world's fourth largest exporter of engines, as of 2021. The UK motorsport industry employs more than 40,000 people, comprises around 4,300 companies and has an annual turnover of around £10 billion. 7 of the 10 Formula One teams are based in the UK, with their technology being used in supercars and hypercars from McLaren, Aston Martin, and Lotus. The aerospace industry of the UK is the second largest national aerospace industry in the world depending upon the method of measurement and has an annual turnover of around £30 billion. The UK space industry was worth £17.5 billion in 2020-21 and employed 48,800 people. Since 2012, the number of space organizations has grown on average nearly 21% per year, with 1,293 organizations reported in 2021. The UK Space Agency has stated in 2023 that it is investing £1.6 billion in space-related projects. The agriculture industry is intensive, highly mechanized and efficient by European standards, producing about 60% of food needs with less than 1.6% of the labor force. Around 2/3 of production is devoted to livestock, 1/3 to arable crops. The UK retains a significant, though much reduced fishing industry. It is also rich in a variety of natural resources including coal, petroleum, natural gas, tin, limestone, iron ore, salt, clay, chalk, gypsum, lead, silica and an abundance of arable land. Transport. A radial road network totals 46,904 kilometers of main roads, 3,497 kilometers of motorways and 344,000 kilometers of paved roads. The M25, encircling London, is the largest and busiest bypass in the world. In 2022, there were a total of 40.8 million licensed vehicles in Great Britain. The UK has an extensive railway network of 16,209 kilometres. In Great Britain, the British rail network was privatised between 1994 and 1997, followed by a rapid rise in passenger numbers. The UK was ranked 8th among national European rail systems in the 2017 European Railway Performance Index assessing intensity of use, quality of service and safety. High Speed 2 is a new high-speed railway under construction linking up London, the Midlands, the North, and Scotland, serving over 25 stations, including 8 of Britain's 10 largest cities and connecting around 30 million people, capable of speeds of up to 225 miles per hour Crossrail, which was renamed the Elizabeth Line in 2016, in honor of Queen Elizabeth II, opened in 2022. It was Europe's largest construction project at the time and is estimated to bring in £42 billion to the UK economy. Great British Railways is a planned state-owned public body that will oversee rail transport in Great Britain. In 2014, there were 5.2 billion bus journeys in the UK, 2.4 billion of which were in London. The red double-decker bus has entered popular culture as an internationally recognized icon of England. The London bus network is extensive, with over 6,800 scheduled services every weekday carrying about 6 million passengers on over 700 different routes, making it one of the most extensive bus systems in the world and the largest in Europe. In the year from October 2009 to September 2010, UK airports handled a total of 211.4 million passengers. In that period, the three largest airports were London Heathrow Airport with 65.6 million passengers, Gatwick Airport with 31.5 million passengers and London Stansted Airport with 18.9 million passengers. London Heathrow Airport, located 24 kilometers west of the capital, is the world's second busiest airport by international passenger traffic and has the most international passenger traffic of any airport in the world. It is the hub for the UK flag carrier British Airways, as well as Virgin Atlantic. Languages. The English language is the official and most spoken language of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom proactively promotes the language globally to build connections, understanding, and trust between people in the UK and countries worldwide. It is estimated that 95% of the UK's population are monolingual English speakers. 5.5% of the population are estimated to speak languages brought to the UK as a result of relatively recent immigration. South Asian languages are the largest grouping, which includes Punjabi, Urdu, Bengali, Sylheti, Hindi, Pahari Patwari, Tamil, and Gujarati. According to the 2011 census, Polish has become the second largest language spoken in England and has 546,000 speakers. In 2019, some 750,000 people spoke little or no English. Bilingual sign in Newry, Ireland. 3 indigenous Celtic languages are spoken in the UK: Welsh, Irish, and Scottish Gaelic. Cornish, which became extinct as a first language in the late 18th century, is subject to revival efforts and has a small group of second language speakers. According to the 2021 census, the Welsh-speaking population of Wales aged 3 or older was 538,300 people. In addition, it is estimated that about 200,000 Welsh speakers live in England. In the 2021 census in Northern Ireland, 12.4% of people had some ability in the Irish language and 10.4% of people had some ability in the Ulster Scots language. Over 92,000 people in Scotland had some Gaelic language ability, including 72% of those living in the Outer Hebrides. The number of children being taught either Welsh or Scottish Gaelic is increasing. Scots, a language descended from early Northern Middle English, has limited recognition alongside its regional variant, Ulster Scots in Northern Ireland, without specific commitments to protection and promotion. Religion. Forms of Christianity have dominated religious life in what is now the United Kingdom for more than 1,400 years. Although a majority of citizens still identify with Christianity in many surveys, regular church attendance has fallen dramatically since the middle of the 20th century, while immigration and demographic change have contributed to the growth of other faiths, most notably Islam. This has led some commentators to variously describe the UK as a multi-faith, secularized, or post-Christian society. In the 2001 census, 71.6% of all respondents indicated that they were Christians, with the next largest faiths being Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism, Judaism, Buddhism, and all other religions. Of the respondents, 15% stated that they had no religion and a further 7% did not state a religious preference. A Tier Fund survey in 2007 showed that only 1 in 10 Britons actually attend church weekly. Between the 2001 and 2011 census, there was a 12% decrease in the number of people who identified as Christian, while the percentage of those reporting no religious affiliation doubled. This contrasted with growth in the other main religious group categories, with the number of Muslims increasing by the most substantial margin to a total of about 5%. The Muslim population has increased from 1.6 million in 2001 to 2.7 million in 2011, making it the second largest religious group in the UK. The Church of England is the established church in England. It retains a representation in the UK Parliament, and the British monarch is its supreme governor. In Scotland, the Church of Scotland is recognised as the national church. It is not subject to state control, and the British monarch is an ordinary member, required to swear an oath to maintain and preserve the Protestant religion and Presbyterian church government upon his or her accession. The church in Wales was disestablished in 1920 and, because the Church of Ireland was disestablished in 1870 before the partition of Ireland, there is no established church in Northern Ireland. Although there are no UK-wide data in the 2001 census on adherence to individual Christian denominations, it has been estimated that 62% of Christians are Anglican, 13.5% Catholic, 6% are Presbyterian, and 3.4% Methodist, with small numbers of other Protestant denominations such as Plymouth Brethren, and Orthodox churches. Migration. Immigration is now contributing to a rising UK population, with arrivals, and UK-born children of migrants accounting for about half of the population increase between 1991 and 2001. According to official statistics released in 2015, 27% of UK live births in 2014 were to mothers born outside the UK. The ONS reported that net migration rose from 2009 to 2010 by 21% to 239,000. In 2013, approximately 208,000 foreign nationals were naturalized as British citizens, the highest number since 1962. This figure fell to around 125,800 in 2014. Between 2009 and 2013, the average number of British citizenships granted annually was 195,800. The most common previous nationalities of those naturalized in 2014 were Indian, Pakistani, Filipino, Nigerian, Bangladeshi, Nepali, Chinese, South African, Polish and Somali. The total number of grants of settlement, which confer permanent residence in the UK but not citizenship, was approximately 154,700 in 2013, higher than the previous 2 years. Emigration was an important feature of British society in the 19th century. Between 1815 and 1930, around 11.4 million people emigrated from Britain and 7.3 million from Ireland. Estimates show that by the end of the 20th century, some 300 million people of British and Irish descent were permanently settled around the globe. Today, at least 5.5 million UK-born people live abroad, mainly in Australia, Spain, the United States and Canada. Education. Education in the United Kingdom is a devolved matter, with each country having a separate education system. About 38% of the United Kingdom population has a university or college degree, which is the highest percentage in Europe, and among the highest percentages in the world. The United Kingdom is home to many universities, including the University of Oxford and University of Cambridge, which often achieve first place on global rankings. University education has varied tuition fees between the different regions of the UK. England and Wales have a fixed maximum annual fee for all UK citizens. Northern Ireland and Scotland have a reduced maximum fee or no fee for citizens where it is their home region. Some NHS courses have bursaries which pay the fee, and in 2017 it was stated that each doctor gets subsidised by £230,000 during their training. In 2022, the Programme for International Student Assessment, coordinated by the OECD, ranked the overall knowledge and skills of British 15-year-olds as 14th in the world in reading, mathematics, and science. The average British student scored 494, well above the OECD average of 478. Healthcare. The modern system of universal publicly funded in the United Kingdom has its origins in the creation of the National Health Service in 1949, which still exists to this day and is the primary healthcare provider in the United Kingdom. The widespread popularity of the NHS has led to it being described as a national religion. Healthcare in the United Kingdom is a devolved matter, and each country has its own system of universal publicly funded healthcare, although private healthcare is also available. Public healthcare is provided to all UK permanent residents and is mostly free at the point of need, being paid for from general taxation. The World Health Organization, in 2000, ranked the provision of healthcare in the United Kingdom as 15th best in Europe and 18th in the world. Since 1979, expenditure on healthcare has been increased significantly. The 2018 OECD data, which incorporates in health a chunk of what in the UK is classified as social care, has the UK spending £3,121 per head. In 2017 the UK spent £2,989 per person on healthcare, around the median for members of the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. Regulatory bodies are organised on a UK-wide basis, such as the General Medical Council, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, and non-governmental based, such as the Royal Colleges. Political and operational responsibility for healthcare lies with 4 national executives. Healthcare in England is the responsibility of the UK government. Healthcare in Northern Ireland is the responsibility of the Northern Ireland Executive. Healthcare in Scotland is the responsibility of the Scottish Government, and healthcare in Wales is the responsibility of the Welsh Government. Each national health service has different policies and priorities, resulting in contrasts. Culture. The culture of the United Kingdom is influenced by many factors, including the nation's island status, its history, and being a political union of 4 countries with each preserving elements of distinctive traditions, customs, and symbolism. As a result of the British Empire, British influence can be observed in the language, culture, and legal systems of many of its former colonies, in particular, the United States, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and Ireland, a common culture known today as the Anglosphere. The substantial cultural influence of the United Kingdom has led to it being described as a cultural superpower. A global survey in 2023 ranked the UK 3rd in the most influential countries rankings, behind the US and China. Literature. British literature includes literature associated with the United Kingdom, the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands. Most British literature is in English. In 2005, some 206,000 books were published in the United Kingdom, and in 2006 it was the largest publisher of books in the world. The English playwright and poet William Shakespeare is widely regarded as the greatest dramatist of all time. The 20th century English crime writer Agatha Christie is the best-selling novelist of all time. 12 of the top 25 of 100 novels by British writers chosen by a BBC poll of global critics were written by women. These included works by George Eliot, Virginia Woolf, Charlotte and Emily Bronte, Mary Shelley, Jane Austen, Doris Lessing and Zadie Smith. Scotland's contributions include Arthur Conan Doyle, Sir Walter Scott, J. M. Barrie, Robert Louis Stevenson and the poet Robert Burns. Scotland's capital, Edinburgh, was UNESCO's first worldwide city of literature. Welsh literature includes Britain's oldest known poem, Y Gododdin, which was composed most likely in the late 6th century. It was written in Cumbric or Old Welsh and contains the earliest known reference to King Arthur. The Arthurian legend was further developed by Geoffrey of Monmouth. Poet David ap Gwilym is regarded as one of the greatest European poets of his age. Daniel Owen is credited as the first Welsh-language novelist, publishing Rhys Lewis in 1885. The best known of the Anglo-Welsh poets are Dylan Thomas and R.S. Thomas, the latter nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1996. Leading Welsh novelists of the 20th century include Richard Llewellyn and Kate Roberts. Irish writers, living at a time when all of Ireland was part of the United Kingdom, include Oscar Wilde, Bram Stoker, and George Bernard Shaw. There have been many authors whose origins were from outside the United Kingdom but who moved to the UK, including Joseph Conrad, T.S. Eliot, Kazuo Ishiguro, Sir Salman Rushdie and Ezra Pound. Music. The Proms is a classical music festival, most closely associated with Henry Wood and held at the Royal Albert Hall, which regularly plays music by Edward Elgar and other British composers. Various styles of music have become popular in the UK, including the indigenous folk music of England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Historically, there has been exceptional Renaissance music from the Tudor period, with masses, madrigals, and lute music by Thomas Tallis, John Taverner, William Byrd, Orlando Gibbons and John Dowland. After the Stuart Restoration, an English tradition of dramatic masques, anthems, and airs became established, led by Henry Purcell, followed by Thomas Arne and others. The German-born composer George Frideric Handel became a naturalized British citizen in 1727, when he composed the anthem Zadok the Priest for the coronation of George II. It became the traditional ceremonial music for anointing all future monarchs. Handel's many oratorios, such as his famous Messiah, were written in the English language. In the second half of the 19th century, as Arthur Sullivan and his librettist W.S. Gilbert wrote their popular Savoy operas, Edward Elgar's wide range of music rivaled that of his contemporaries on the continent. Increasingly, however, composers became inspired by the English countryside and its folk music, notably Gustav Holst, Ralph Vaughan Williams, and Benjamin Britten, a pioneer of modern British opera. Among the many post-war composers, some of the most notable have made their own personal choice of musical identity: Peter Maxwell Davies, Harrison Birtwistle, and John Tavener. Today, recent classical singers include Alfie Boe, Bryn Terfel, Catherine Jenkins, Michael Ball, Roderick Williams, Russell Watson, and Sarah Brightman, while Nicola Benedetti and Nigel Kennedy are renowned for their violin ability.